Hello and welcome. I'm Earl Moxham, and I'm pleased to welcome Robin Jerry Small. I describe him as a folk philosopher and a rebel with a cause, well known for the causes he has espoused throughout his life in Jamaica. Jerry, it's good to see you, and I'm going to trace your own life in Jamaica, your own engagement with the public, and a bit of your own philosophy in the context as well of your family history. So let me just start, however, with the very basic. When and where were you born?
Well, I'm happy to be here and thank you very much for inviting me. I was born very near to here and grew and started life for the first year very near to here, right on Retirement Crescent, born at Nuttall Hospital. So, yeah, it's crossroads right near to here.
At that time, your parents were obviously living and working in Kingston?
Yeah, my father was, he used to be moved around the island as, many civil servants, especially being a young judge before that, a clerk of the courts. My mother was a teacher, but at the time she had stopped teaching for some time, I think since marriage. She started later again.
What year was this?
1948, it was about the same time when the university was established.
Indeed.
February.
But it was not long before the family moved again, so you grew up initially in the country?
Yeah, I think I was 11 months old when they moved towards Brownstone. When I say towards Brownstone, they stayed in Trelawney for a few months first at a house there out in the hill above Clarkstown. And then we moved to Brownstone, St. Ann.
How long were you there for?
We were there from the end of 48 until the end of 53. That's for 5 years. I think we moved back to town on the last day of 1953.
So that was mainly due to your father's own work as a judge?
Yeah, they are transferred. That's why I think recent years I learned that they are not properly called judges. The judges of the resident magistrate court.
Well, these days they are called parish judges, but at the time they were called resident magistrates.
Yeah, and so they're called resident because they moved. I mean, they served. They were supposed to be resident in the area that they served, and they would be moved from time to time. The Supreme Court judges were almost national or territorial judges, which they would go. That's where the word circuit comes on, because they would go on a circuit, moving around and trying cases. I think my brothers can tell you more about that.
Sure. No, these were very early formative years for you, those first 5 years of your life. Sometimes it is a little bit traumatic for a child to be, pulled up from where you are beginning to make friends, form associations, and suddenly you are yanked from one location to another, and all the little friends you're growing up with are left behind. How did you find that early experience?
Well, it was very disturbing for me, especially after moving 3 times, consciously moving 3 times back to Kingston, and from just near here at Ruthven Road to Hopefield Avenue, a little further up Hope Road. And coming to realize that none of the places that I got attached to belonged to my family. As a little child, people might think that children are not conscious of these things. I was very conscious that I see how happy other families and children are when they live in their own home, owned by their family and their own land. And very early, it was disturbing to me that even though where I grew up and after I came home from the hospital, belonged to my family. For the entire time that I was conscious of living with my family, till teenage years, was all spent in houses belonging to the government, That's even worse than belonging to even other landlords.
But there was a certain status that came with that situation, though, because of the position your father and your parents held in the society. Or
Yeah.
that did not appeal to you?
It never appealed to me at all. From very early, I came to resent the status consciousness of most of the people, especially educated black people who used to cling to these moves and upward mobility as everything in life. Matter of fact, when I moved to Kingston, the first couple of evenings when we saw the helpers going home, the male helper stayed on the premises, but the female helper going home. Both me and my sister a year and a half older than me. I was 5 years old, soon to be 6. Followed her to the gate couple times every evening when she going home and asked her, now why is she going home? Because we are accustomed to her living with us. We're accustomed for all of the people helping us to live with us. And she made us know that she has to go home and take care of children. And the first thing I contradicted her, saying that you are not married, you can't have children. Because I was taught that, children are the product of marriage. She said, yes, she has children. And then...
on that particular note, then, do you think you benefited from the fact that there was almost a sort of a cross-fertilization between two sections of society that you were growing up with?
Yeah. Because very early, first thing and then I asked her, I remember one evening at the gate, I asked her how much money she get, how much pay. And when she told me, I couldn't believe it, and I went to my old lady. That's one of the first times I got in trouble. Went to my old lady and asked her how the helper could survive on 25 and 30 shillings a week. I started to get in trouble about those things.
So you almost became a union delegate as a child?
Yeah, and then when I moved to the next house, I got in trouble for sharing some of the groceries with two of the helpers, a male and a female. One of the female didn't take any of it from me, and I think she probably reported it. I think that was the one who made the old lady know that I was giving away some of the groceries. Get in trouble. That was about 2 years later in 56. I was about 8 years old at the time.
All right, 8 years old at the time. That brings me back to the question of your early schooling. Which primary school did you attend?
Well, technically, I was homeschooled, so that when I went to school first at 3, nearly 4, in 1952, I already started to learn to read and could write.
So that was when you came back into Kingston?
No, in Brownstown.
In Brownstown.
Yeah, so I really followed my sister to school like Mary, little lamb, really.
What was the name of that school?
Judah Prep School in Brownstown. It was a dame school, dame school. Is that kind of British tradition, I suppose, where schools run by unmarried ladies, what them call dames.
Dames.
Next to homeschooling. Mm-hmm. So she and her sister used to run them school there. She was from the Judah family, a famous Roman Catholic family in Jamaica. I think 2 of her brothers were Roman Catholic priests, and either 1 or 2, and they had lawyers in the family also.
Well, there was a Judah who was chairman of Rjr Jamaica.
Same family.
Same family. So from Brownstown, you came back into Kingston. Which was the first school in Kingston that you attended?
Well, my mother's cousin was a teacher like herself. And when she left Morris Nib, probably most famous famous prep school in the 40s, Mrs. Vaz, she established her own school, Vaz Prep School, in 1951. So in 54, when we came to Kingston, I started going there at 5 years old. It was just 3 years old, the school. As a matter of fact, the first classroom was a garage. And that garage was still in use, even up to when I left Vaz in 1957. So I went to Vaz Prep School. Then the polio epidemic broke out in Jamaica, I think in the late part of 54. And the polio epidemic affected mostly children. Matter of fact, I think the proper name for the polio is infantile paralysis, or poliomyelitis, I think is a medical or Latin name. It used to affect children, as I'm calling it, infantile paralysis. So my parents, I used to have to stay at school. My sister had to stay at school till my father done with court. So we would be at school waiting for him to pick us up all 4, 5 o'clock in the evening. Sometimes he would come early and drop us home and go back. So because of not wanting us to hang around, especially because the polio was so contagious, not wanting us to hang around so long, my parents moved us in 1955 to a school very near to our house at Ruthven Road, St. Andrew Prep School. I went there for a year, but we were one of very few black children there. Or maybe a dozen black children there, really, black children.
What was that experience like, that encounter with children?
It wasn't good for me, because both me and my sister, it happens in schools and among children all over. Children kind of ostracize, new children, unless they have a lot of friends there, or unless they have certain status. So for the first term at least, both me and my sister experienced being distanced by most of the children. And some of them would deliberately and in very demonstrable ways draw away from us, especially when they're passing us in the passage or passing in a doorway.
Did you put that down, A, to the fact that you were new, or B, to the fact of your color?
Well, I didn't understand that children frequently do this to new people, but I definitely knew that color had something to do with it from right away. And some of them would voice it, that some of them would voice it and even tell other children and even tell the teachers. Some of them told the teachers when some teachers asking why are they doing this. Say they have ringworm. I know black children when they have sores or in a cut, when it's getting better, they usually have a very dark spot. If it's a sore, usually in a circle. So they used to spread this little argument. So we have ringworm, but a lot of them knew that it wasn't so. But my sister developed friendships with some girls, especially some who live very near to us. Nusword and some other people. But I I only had one good friend who lived near here beside Cargill Avenue. The avenue next to Cargill Avenue, a little boy named Robertson. I can't remember his first name, was my best friend. But after a year of the strangeness of, I think there's probably a couple of hundred children at the school, most of them Jamaican, white, and foreigners. Foreign whites and Jews, Arabs, some few Chinese, few Indians. But mostly well-to-do, all of them very well-to-do people. The few, there are a lot of mulatto people like David Vernon and his sister, born in England. I think they were born in England, not sure. A lot of other people like that. David Ashley and his sister, Dr. Diana Ashley. She was very assertive and very dark, but she was one of the leading students of the school, and a few black teachers like her cousin, Miss Demetrius. But I was very uncomfortable, and I told my parents before the end of the year, I don't want to go back there. So they moved me at the end of 55 back to Vaz.
And so the Vaz experience was more cosmopolitan? How would you describe it?
No, the St. Andrew experience was cosmopolitan,
Yes.
in terms of the mixture of people. But even though the mixture was international, it was mostly either white or very light-skinned people. So it's still very cosmopolitan. There were Indians, there were Chinese to a few, and other minorities. Vaz was less cosmopolitan, but mostly middle-income people's children, but it was based in Rallington Town. So a lot of Rallington Town people who children otherwise would not have been able to go to Vaz were there. And a few children even used to go to school barefooted. I remember that clearly. Not many, but at least half dozen.
Rallington Town, interesting place, 2 important cricket clubs, lots of activities in that area. How did that help to form your own personality and outlook?
It was very good. As I said, there were 2 or 3 very important cricket clubs. Wembley right beside, and I think Kensington and Lucas. And a lot of the West Indies cricket team and West Indians playing other regional matches used to stay at Vaz, because Mrs. Vaz's husband and her brother-in-law, Mr. Boggis, were serious cricketers and friends with a lot. So I met a lot of the cricketers there. Ali Binns, a Jamaican, and many of the other cricketers. I saw them there for the first time, The Warrell and Weeks and the Valentines and a lot of the, Jamaican and West Indies cricketers.
Did you meet George Headley, who was in fact at one time a member of Lucas?
I didn't meet Headley, but two boys came to Vaz in my second stint there is 56, named Headley. And they were said to be sons. And matter of fact, they resemble two other sons of his that I knew. One working at the University Hospital, oldest son. And Lindy Headley, who I get to know very well, was my wife's best friend's husband. Lindy Headley, Carmen Headley's husband. So these two boys who came there named Headley, they had a strong resemblance to these other Headleys, and they were said to be Headley's children. As a matter of fact, Mrs. Vaz quite likely took them in there because of the contact with that. They live somewhere up the Mountain View Avenue.
Obviously, this was very early in your own formation, but the 1950s, things were continuing to happen politically and some important figures were emerging. Were you aware of the personalities of a Bustamante and a Norman Manley and others in the early to mid-50s?
Yeah, from I was in Brownstown, I became conscious both of Bustamante and Norman Manley, even though I left Brownstown at 5. Because I remember coming home from somewhere, driving through the square of Brownstown, past the market. My father avoided the usual route and drove another route that only took him partly past the market. And explained, and we saw the crowd of people explain that there's a political meeting down there. And we heard the people singing, "I will follow Bustamante till we're dead." So I am there, all of us, especially me, asking questions, about this song and this Bustamante. And of course, we used to love the Jamaican confectioner, Bustamante Backbone, which is a small, sweet, dark caramel sweet that was very tough. And he used to call Bustamante Backbone because them say his own Bustamante Backbone was as tough as that. It was a heroic figure who was supposed to be so tough. Then Norman Manley came to Brownstown. His wife also came in connection with an arts festival in Brownstown. I forgot what they call it. But my father was one of the organizers of this art festival. And Norman Manley also came there, and my mother told me, and even my father lately, but my mother, Norman Manley was saying to her, must take very special care of Ronald Small because, he have some great work to do. Matter of fact, my father later told me that at that time, and even before, he had tried to attract my father into the People's National Party, even though he was a judge at the time. Because when he came back to Jamaica in 1934 as a young lawyer, for a while, he was associated with Norman Manley in his chambers, not really, not by any means a partner, but getting cases from him. And matter of fact, he said the first murder case that he defended and won in St. James was one of the cases that Norman Manley wasn't so confident of the success, and he got it.
I'm going to come back to your father and that story because I think it's very important in terms of filling out the picture in respect of your father and his own work. But let me come back to you now. From Vaz, you then went to Jamaica College?
Yeah.
Well, tell me about your entry into JC.
Well, you usually leave Vaz in 6th standard. We used to call it farm in that time, 6th standard. But I was in 5th standard, but I was doing very well for years. I used to come first in the class every year. And at Vaz, I started learning, not we, but I was 7 years old when they started teaching me geometry, algebra, and Spanish and Latin. So by the time I reached 5th standard, I was ahead of, what high school required. And my father got me to take the entrance examination to JC. Not common entrance, it was an examination that boys were given to see if they were ready to enter first form at JC. So late in 57, I took that examination and passed and started JC in January 58 when I was 9 years old.
At that point, where were your older brothers, Hugh and Richard?
Well, Hugh was in the upper 6th form, about to leave school. He was 17 years old. I was 16 years old when I reached there. I'm 17 in July. Richard was 14 years old when I reached there, 15 in January, later in January, in lower 6.
So all 3 small brothers were were there at Jamaica College at one particular point.
Yeah.
Very often, younger brothers, younger siblings who enter the same school as the older ones, they either benefit from or suffer the consequences of the older siblings' presence there. What was your experience?
That was quite true. Well, now, in some respects, you got a certain leverage, but in other respects, some people were out to get you, you know. And for 2 reasons, I experienced that. Because even one teacher had a kind of vendetta who happened to be my housemaster. And because my father had objected to certain comments that he had made. One of my brothers had gone to school with the soul of, you know, I have a couple souls. Soul of, one of the soles, either both or one of the soles of his feet worn through. I remember hearing that teacher made a comment that, imagine, you know, if, his father is a high court judge, and that's what taking place. When my father, something came out of it. Anyway, the other thing is that I could not bring myself to obey the demands in the initiation. When you go to JC, and many schools, public schools and universities, in the British tradition, and suppose worldwide, new students are subjected to certain inferiority demonstration.
It's particularly bad or particularly harsh if you're a boarder. Were you boarding?
No, my brothers had boarded, but when they came back to Kingston, they stopped boarding. So you used to have to sing. Anybody who was there a year before you and more was able to interrogate you, even if they are in a lower class than you, interrogate you about your antecedents and your social standing and where you come from and all kind of thing. Everything, including what is your sister's ages and preferences, all kind of things. And also demand that you sing a song. And they were permitted to do that for the whole year, the whole first year.
How did you react?
I could not bring myself to obey any guy demanding me to sing. So I never sing.
So you got into fist fights?
Not actually fist fights, no, because most of the boys were senior to me and bigger than me. I was not very big. But I couldn't bring myself to bow to them. I was not taught, my father never teach me for bow. Many evenings I was there till 5, 6 o'clock, because they would keep it there, especially the boarders. 5, 6 o'clock in the evening till night coming down before I got to leave and go home. So I was coming home late every evening.
And the teachers would not intervene?
No, the tradition is that this is allowed, you know. Even Norman Manley has written about it in his experience at JC.
So was JC good or bad for you, on balance?
It was good, you know. I didn't want to go to JC. I wanted to go to Wolmer's. Because my 2 cousins, the Moody's, who live right near your Cargill Avenue, they were doing very well at Wolmer's, both as athletes and they were, you know, scholastically at least one of them was doing well. And matter of fact, they were driving motor cars from them was 9, 10 years old. And them had them own gun and them used to go hunting with them father, you know. Big, long shotgun and them things. So I used to admire that very much. I wanted to go to Wolmer's. Anyway, my brothers were there and my father sent me there. He didn't want me to go to George's where he went. Although he appreciated George's, they had stopped him from taking senior Cambridge, because he had passed junior already, I believe. And they said, well, he was too young, I thought, must have 15 or so. So his father took him from George's and sent him to St. John's College, where the Farrakhan's uncle was the founder, Mr. Clark of St. John's College. Yeah, so I said I wanted to go to Wolmer's, but having gone to JC, I had a good experience because many of us from even first farm banded together to resist the class and color regime that was at JC. We weren't the first to do it. But
who was the principal at the time?
Mr. Chambers, and a past student of JC and athlete. And after that, Eneva was the next principal, also a past student of JC. Well, I got wrapped up in with Eneva because myself and 4 other guys organized a strike against Eneva because of his neglect of the school. But it was a good experience.
What did that strike consist of?
Well, we restricted participation of the strike to boys down to 4th form, nobody below 4th form.
You're in what form at that stage?
I was in 5th form. Second year, I spent, I think, three different years in 4th form.
How come?
Well, I moved into, I followed a youth, good friend who I just made friends with, to his classroom, and I was in his class for a term before they realized that they realized I was not on the register, and they realized that I was not supposed to be in that. But I was doing all right because, well, I was way ahead of that level of work when I was at VAS, 2nd form work at JC. So them discovered and put me back down in 1st form. But at the end of the 1st term, they moved 5 of us from 1st form, who they say were way ahead of 1st form. Myself, God White, Ward Mills, a friend of us named Banks, who used to be the Institute of Jamaica, and Jeffrey. 5 of us were moved to 2nd form. So I was moved back to 2nd form. So I was actually in 2nd form from I was 9. When I reached 3rd form, I was 10. And when I reached 4th form, I was 11. But after I never became the headmaster in the 2nd term of 1960 when I was in 4th form. And he decided that he's going to put me back down into 3rd form because at 11 years old, I had become 12 at that time. So at 12 years old, I was not mature enough for 4th form. Actually, I was not doing any work because the work was so easy for me. I wasn't doing any work. So he moved me back down to the 3rd form. You can imagine it's very embarrassing, especially in the middle of the year, to move back down to a lower form. But I was still 2 years below the average age of the farm. Anyway, that was that.
What was the reaction to the strike?
Well, the strike was JBC workers had gone on strike. And Eneva was the deputy chairman of the board, but he was practically running the board. And he was getting more and more involved in the board and with other government attachments. Matter of fact, Bustamante used to send his personal Cadillac to pick up Eneva sometime to go and do government business. His attachment with JBC was very much like Rjr Reid, very much being, an advisor to Holness and eventually becoming Minister of Education. So, but JC had started to suffer. JC was on a high for some years, winning all of the competitions in football, shooting, swimming, and all that for a couple of years, and doing well scholastically. And he had help with that, but at the same time, he also was neglecting the school to the extent that one of the reasons why some of the 6th formers and even the prefects supported us was that he was attending very few of the classes that he was supposed to be teaching.
So your actions at the time, was it more in solidarity with the workers of the JBC or more to get back at Eneva?
It was both, And we were helped by some of the JBC workers who we met. Me and my cousin going home one evening. I didn't live in Halfway Tree, but I decided to follow him to Halfway Tree to see what these strike demonstrations were like. And I went down there and saw them. And some of the guys there knew me, met me at my brother's wedding earlier that year. No, it was later that year. No, that was before. I knew some of them before, like Hugh Gentles, and we told them that boy, we would like organize a strike at JC. And some of them decided, said they would come and meet with the other students, and some of them followed us up to JC, outside of JC, the fence outside, because it was a back fence where Hope Gardens and the water course joined with JC. Anyway, the strike was to object to Eneva and also to solidarity with JBC. And matter of fact, another thing that provoked us is that university students who demonstrated in support of the JBC workers marched through JC a few days before. And when they marched through JC, the Harman barracks, the riot police followed them in there and threatened, were preparing to throw tear gas on them. And we, some of us students, we dared them to throw any tear gas inside JC. They were actually called in there by the headmaster's wife, Eneva's wife. So we confronted them and dared them to throw any tear gas, and they retreated, and the university students continued their march. That was the first time I think I saw Trevor Monroe and Homer Heron and some other guys who I came to know later.
The JBC strike, of course, was being spearheaded by another JC old boy, Michael Manley.
Yeah.
Did you see any irony in that?
Yeah, and we were conscious also that Michael Manley himself had organized a strike at JC in 1940, in the early 40s.
Against his own headmaster?
Yes, and eventually he led another demonstration built around him when he refused to take corporal punishment from the headmaster. And he was very popular among the boys. So he had already organized a strike, and he also demonstrated defiance otherwise, and left JC. His father also had organized the beating of bullies. As a young student at JC, Norman Manley organized the beating of all bullies till most of the bullies were in retreat. He has written about it.
So you left Jamaica College at what age and in what year?
1964, 16 years old.
What prompted you to leave?
Well, the name of all of the strikers were taken down. All of the strikers, we converged on a piece of ground that was forbidden for us to walk on. They call it holy ground. So we converged on that piece of ground deliberately. And
that was in the vicinity of the chapel?
Yeah, it is a strip of land adjacent to the chapel and the assembly hall and the prefect's room. It is bordering on the playing field. And it's called holy ground. Only members of staff and prefects may step on it. So they said, anyway, all of the names of the strikers were taken down by some of the prefects and some masters who did not participate. But most of the prefects, about half of the prefects or more, supported the strike, including the head boy. It was very surprising to me because me and him wasn't good friends. But later on, we had a decent relationship. But they took down the names of over 150 of us. And the name of the 5 known organizers, a list was put there, and it was also announced that everybody on this list is under watch. And in getting into any trouble, anybody entering the headmaster's office for punishment or review, the first thing he would do is check the list, if that person's name on the list, and consequences would be added. But the 5 ringleaders, red stars were put beside their names. It was visibly displayed. And it was made known to them that they might as well not think about returning to school after the end of the school year. So I got a holiday job as usual in the civil service in 1964, right near a tax office office. And at the end of during the holiday, summer holiday, I realized that there are other people, most of the people working in the tax office were getting the same pay as me. And were living quite well. Some of them were married with children, some of them even driving cars. I didn't realize at the time that some of them might be supplementing their salary with some like a tax office tidbits and things. But basically I realized that all of these adults were living, many of them married and with children. And I decided that I would not go back to school. But before the holiday ended, I organized and left home also.
How were your parents responding to you at this stage?
Well, my father never used to talk to me much about most of the trouble that I used to get in at JC. And he was mostly away from home during circuit and so on. And there was a breakdown in the marriage just about that time. So just about the same time that I left home, he also moved out of the home.
Were you conscious of the fact that at this stage you probably were not in the best position to say matriculate to university, for example?
Well, I knew that, but furthermore, I didn't. The only thing that I focused on that I would want further studying from I was early teens, I was discouraged away from it. My father told me that there's no scope in Jamaica for anybody to be a mechanical engineer,
He wanted you to be a lawyer.
yeah, which was not true. It was not true, but he was telling me that. Well, from I was 8 years old, I told him that I do not want to become a lawyer, but he wanted me to become one. Similar circumstances to how he decided to become one at maybe 7 or 8 years old, according to his, probably my brothers will tell you about that. I can tell you about it also.
But okay, so at this stage, you you are becoming more and more active, more and more conscious of some of the inequities in the society. You also had an experience at the JBC. You had a very brief stint there.
It wasn't really a stint. I met, after knowing you gentles through the strike, at my brother's wedding in the summer, I think it was, or the early, in the summer, I think it was the summer or about May, June of 64. Spoke with Hugh Gentles at the wedding reception, and he told me that he would like me to help him organize a young people's discussion program on JBC TV. The very popular program from the inception of JBC, Teenage Dance Party, had been discontinued. And another program substituted it for a while, but it didn't do nearly as well. And Hugh Gentles wanted to organize a young people discussion program. So he asked me to, to help organize it. So I got a couple other people, along with two people that he knew who were connected to JBC. One was Dan Robotham, who used to work at JBC, who was now at the University of the West Indies. And the other was Greg Wilmot, the younger son, the middle son of Fred Wilmot and Cynthia Wilmot. So myself, Dan Robotham, Greg Wilmot, and a young lady, Miss Johnson, the daughter of Mr. Johnson, who was a United Nations organization guy in Jamaica. I forgot what his name was. He was a very civic-minded Jamaican. Anyway, that daughter, she was with us on the program. So we had the first program we discussed, we discussed about, young people in Jamaica and so on, and most of us expressed some opinions that the government at the time, the JBC strike just having been concluded a few months before. The government, especially the minister in our control of JBC, Siaga, wasn't very comfortable with it. We did a second program, and after the second program, it was cut. The name of the program was Young World Discussion Program, similar to the Verdict is Yours kind of discussion, kind of semi-debate discussion program. The Verdict is Yours, and I forgot what the other one was. The adult was these programs were very popular. There was a vacancy in the JBC library, I heard, for a job assistant in the record library. Well, I naively applied for it. By this time, Eneva was announced to be the new manager. It was announced from about November. It was announced somewhere October in 64. And I was applying for the job at about the same time. I even had lent the record library some records, some Scatterlight records and some others. I was surprised that they didn't have. They had a lot of Scatterlight records, but I even lent them some records and was thinking, boy, I might get this job. Yeah.
But so you think Eneva blocked your getting the job?
Well, certainly I don't think Siaga would stoop so low. When I say stoop so low, I don't think he would concern himself with what matters so at that level. But Eneva also at the same time had sent a message with my brother Hugh that I was welcome to come back to JC. He was in his last term at JC. But not only I didn't trust him because I suspected that he was going to try get back at me, once I was back in the school. But at that time I was also not mature enough to know that even Hugh Small himself was one of the major people in the NW organizing the JBC strike. I was mature enough to know that even after conflicts, many adults would resume a cordial relationship. So him and Hugh chatting together and sending messages to Hugh to me, it was a typical,
You thought it was a sellout?
not a sellout, but I thought it was a typical adult enticement.
It was during this period as well that you became attracted to Rasta.
Yeah.
Share that experience with me.
Well, having grown up with my father, both my father and my mother were very black conscious, but not very demonstrative, you know, being my father being a civil servant, but my mother was even fiercely black conscious than my father. Both of their fathers were Garveyites.
Yes. In fact, I think I saw a picture of your father at a reception at Jamaica House for Haile Selassie.
I don't think it was Jamaica House. I think Haile Selassie had a reception at Sheraton. No, I think it was at King's House.
King's House, rather.
King's House. And he had a reception the next night at Sheraton. His Majesty had a reception for the public of Jamaica. But the night before, the government of Jamaica had a reception for him. Matter of fact, my father was the first person introduced to him in the receiving line.
All right. So take me back to how you got involved or attracted.
Well, growing up with parents who were not people who really stoop or bow to the white society, even though them would take honors and that kind of thing. And you know, growing up, being acquainted, you know, looking through my old man books and things from a very early age. Sometime in the company of my brothers, you know, going into a study and looking through books and things like World's Great Men of Color, you know, and many of these books. I remember my brother showing me even, this was about not later than 1955, showing me some pictures, some certificates that look like, you know, some big checks, bank checks. I know I was accustomed to bank checks at the time. But I saw pictures of ships on them, a picture of a ship, you know, a drawing of a ship, and some colors, red, black, and green. And I later realized, right away I realized that these were shares of the Black Star Line, which belonged to my father's father. My father was keeping certain documents and trunks full of papers and memorabilia for my grandfather, because his house was packed up. And we used to look through these things and even found a little bag of, quite a big bag, about half the size of that glass, of some fine dust that I was told this is gold dust, and it was brought from Panama by my grandfather. I got to know of my grandfather being in Panama and all over the place, being involved with the UNIA. And many other things. And even people like Dudley Thompson, who, when he came back to Jamaica, there was a party at our house for him. And many other people like these were very black conscious and proud and so on. And matter of fact, when we moved into the area of Hopefield Avenue, we were practically the only family of real black people on that road. And things like this make you self-assertive about, you know, not being intimidated. And
So who were some other persons in the Rastafari movement locally who influenced you at that stage?
well, I used to admire a lot of the Rastafari. Driving home with my old man, after I went back to Vaz, my old man would pick me up and I would have to drive around with him quite all over the city before we reach home, because he would look about any business he had before we reach home. We used to drive through Jonestown, even Trenchtown, East Kingston, Brownstown, you know, Brownstown. He grew up in Brownstown, Black Street, just opposite Bellevue Hospital. So I used to accompany him, going all over the place looking for old relatives and old friends, and even people who he had sent to prison and who had come out of prison. Because some of the people who used to look after his car, weld the muffler, rod out the radiator and thing, is places in Trenchtown and Jonestown. We used to drive in some yard and them fix it for him sometime and pay them sometime, them do it free. And get acquainted with a lot of these places. And he had old friends like Mr. Supprior, old Garveyite, and his father's friend. So I got acquainted with a lot of these people and got acquainted with a lot of Rastafari. Even some of them preaching on the sidewalk near to Vaz Prep School, where I later found out these people who were dispersed from Pinnacle. And there was a Rastaman who always used to ride through Jamaica College and stop at the headmaster's office and demand that his son be admitted into JC. And he used to talk a lot of things and, you know, talk a lot of things and slogans. And we used to listen to him. And, you know, a lot of the students were afraid of him, but a lot of us gravitated to him. And we used to draw near from a same bicycle riding through the front gate of JC. and listen to the thing. There was another man who was a groundsman at JC, lived down in Standpipe. He used to smoke a lot of ganja near the swimming pool and at the back fence, and people say he's mad. But he also was a ras. They call him Aika. And I remember sitting down, hear him talking to himself on the swimming pool one day and saying, and saying all them boy were cuss him and not call him name. And some like a burrhead nigger. Like a burrhead nigger. And so we wonder why he call people nigger, So one time him say, I'm not a Negro. I'm not a Negro, I'm an African. And him say, El Selassie is not a Negro, And we used to listen to them, we were like a boy at 11, 12, 13. We used to listen to them argument with interest, and sometimes we laugh, but sometimes we listen and send them, and we gradually getting to understand what I'm talking about.
At that time, there were other uptown young men who were getting involved as well. Peter Phillips was one of them.
Well, Peter was a couple of years younger than me, and I think I remember him coming to JC about 1960. I think his parents came from, had come from England with him. But other schools, there were a couple of youths from some other schools who were Rastafari before us, who I knew of and I used to admire a lot. One was Herman King, about 13 years older than me. His mother was the mayor of Kingston at one time and a member of parliament, Herman Woody King. And another was...
that was Iris King.
Iris King's son. And another one was a guy named Dougie Swaby. He used to go to Calabar, a couple of years older than me, and his brother went to JC.
We are going to have to come back to some of this on another occasion, as you and I have discussed. However, I need to quickly move on to, first of all, the extent to which you got involved with Walter Rodney, and quickly, why you think he was expelled from Jamaica.
Well, as young Rastas, even before His Majesty came here, we were determined that the Rastafari, the main set of people in Jamaica, used to point out to the people of Jamaica that there's not much difference between the JLP and the PNP. And also that both of them were beholden to the British. And later on, after 1952, beholden to the Americans. And Rastafari people used to discuss these things, seeing that the Mugabe movement was becoming more and more inactive. It was mainly the Rastafari who used to explain these things to the people of Jamaica. And little by little, more and more the people of Jamaica came to understand what they were talking about, especially when the Cold War became more and more entrenched in world affairs. So we as young people, even before His Majesty came here, and gravitating towards Rastafari, because me myself admired Marcus Garvey very much, but I said to myself, we need to have leadership that is alive rather than being dead from 1940 like Marcus Garvey. And gradually I got to know about Haile Selassie and his work, and so I gravitated and identify myself with Haile Selassie and his activity and his philosophy. Well, now, in 1966 he came here. By 67...
Rodney?
No, Haile Selassie came here. By 67 I was working at Barclays Bank. And I decided that along with some other Rasses who I was acquainted with, both downtown and midtown, that we, the next year being Human Rights Year, we're going to take advantage of that the government cannot crush us down as so bad in Human Rights Year. We're going to step up the activity of agitation.
Human Rights Year was 1968.
1968. So from 1967, we were preparing for that. And we started to meet with some young people at the university who also were thinking that way. Young people like Gartwright, who had entered university in 1966, I believe. Or was it 67? I think it was 66. Either 66 or 67. And so by the time Walter Rodney came here in January 68, we were already underway with our activity and organizing to start a publication.
The Abeng, I know you were involved in a very short-lived publication before the Abeng. How influential were those two publications for you?
Well, our newspaper we called Black Man Speaks. It wasn't very influential, but it was widely circulated amongst the young Rastafari and high school youths. It was circulated outside Kingston and in Kingston. We could only print a few hundred at a time, so I wouldn't say that it was that influential, but it was a very good learning experience. Later, the Abeng had a much wider support of university students, lecturers, leftists in and out of the university, and people all over Jamaica. And for 9 months, it was regularly published until it kind of failed sometime in September 1969.
Quickly, let's look at the next generation of Smalls, and specifically your own children. What are they doing professionally? How have they, as far as you are concerned, continued to live out their own lives in the context of their own upbringing with your influence and other influences?
Well, I don't think any of them identify as Rastafari. But remember, Rastafari never started out as a religion. But as you know, a lot of the freedom struggles usually develop into religious ritual. But my children, all of them have done very much better than me in terms of professional training and the standard of living that they have been able to pass on to their children.
Well, name them for me.
Well, my first daughter is Adela. She is 52 years old. She's in Florida. She's a nurse and also a psychologist. And my second daughter is Tananya. She's a lawyer. She came back to Jamaica after 13 years in the Caribbean, especially the British Virgin Islands. And my third daughter, she's in North Carolina. She works in the school system there also. She's Shima. Shima bit. And fourth daughter is Amber. She works in the publishing industry with Carlang, and she does editing privately, book editing, like her mother, Sandra Small, my wife. And my fifth daughter is Shala. She's an accountant and what is the other thing? I forgot what is the other associated profession. Audit and so on. With the NCEB group. And then my son, I had 5 daughters before my first one came, Ali. He has spent 5 years in the U.S. Air Force and is now working on his own. He's married to an Air Force wife also in South Carolina. And then my daughter, my 6th daughter, her name is Heather. She is a lawyer also in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. And my last child, Asfa, he's a car dealer. But he has been a businessman from he was in high school and declared that he will be a businessman from very early.
Well, tell me a bit about your wife.
Yeah, well, I met her, I was the last of my circle of friends to know her because I was a person, I don't really like being set up or introduced to ladies. I prefer make my acquaintance myself. But I met her when she was at our 16th birthday party. I was 17, and she was one of my closest friends, Sister Gartwhite. I got involved, I said, that September 65, and shortly after I convinced her to stop straightening her hair. And she was the first girl who she was a girl who mostly popularized African hairstyle in Jamaica. We used to see Miriam Makeba and a few American ladies with it. And she was, she went through a lot. Matter of fact, while she was still in school, she helped us to do the typesetting and typing for the Black Man Speaks, and that was her first introduction to publishing. And later she made her career in publishing for years after working at the university in the registry and in the language lab. And she has had, as I said, 6 of my children. She has been most responsible for the good upbringing of the children, and she's very quiet but strong.
You have made a significant contribution to the University of the West Indies because of your well-established record in terms of public affairs. How fulfilling was that for you?
Well, it is good, especially that the university recognized that, seeing that I'm not a graduate of the University of the West Indies. I didn't even finish high school, but I had a lot of friends at the university, and I was very active with the students in the university. And especially after Walter Rodney came here, a lot of the connection of the university students with the outside was done with people like myself, help. Although for years before we were there, university students had been interacting with outside, even Walter and himself.
So formally it was a folk philosophy fellowship?
Well, in the year 2000, they awarded me a folk philosophy fellowship. I was the second. The inaugural folk philosophy fellow was Mortimer Planner, who in 1995, the university, through Rjr and Rjr asked me to contact Mortimer Planner because they couldn't find him for a couple of years and they didn't even know if he was alive. I was in contact with him and I brought him to the university because, especially urgently, they were having a Rex Nettleford conference. And Rjr said it would be one of the greatest pleasures for Nettleford to have Planner there. Matter of fact, when I brought Planner there, he was very ill and they looked after him medically and so on. But when he appeared in the conference, a big international conference, his appearance at the conference was one of the highlights of the conference. They kept him there, put him under medical examination and care, gave him a residence to live in, and decided that they are going to take care of him for the rest of his life, which they did, 11 more years until 2006. And around him, they instituted the Folk Philosophy Fellowship to institute a means and method and institution by which they could formally share the understanding and experience of people outside of the formal education system with the students and faculty at the university. So Mortimer Planner was the first folk philosophy fellow from about 1997. And in 2000, they invited me to be the second folk philosophy fellow. After me, Muta Baruka was installed as a third such one. I offered them some advice that I don't think it should be restricted to only Rastafari because it would not truly represent all of the folk philosophy of Jamaica. And it should not be restricted to males, you know. But by the time Muta Baruka fulfilled his fellowship there, Boris Evans left the dean, left the seat of the dean of the faculty. And it was dismantled after that.
We're almost out of time, and I wanted you to sort of look back, not just at your own life, but that of your parents, your grandparents, your forebears, and look forward in terms of your children. How would you say your family has been affected by and have affected the Jamaican experience?
Well, I think we have played our part more or less. It could be plenty more, but I have to be grateful. Now, for years, I had this book and I never looked into it. It was a St. Hugh's High School magazine, 1938 to 1939. My father's youngest sibling, his sister, Elaine Small, she went to St. Hugh's. She was brilliant. And I looked in this school magazine years later. Matter of fact, just in 2015, I think it was before I realized. And when I looking through the magazine with herself as editor, I reached into the section where there was some poetry. And when I saw the poetry by herself, Elaine Small, the name of it is Grief Stricken. And it says in gay and joy-bent London town, this is in 1937, in gay and joy-bent London town there dwells a saddened man who only now must bear his grief as bravely as he can. And she was writing about this man in London town, this black man who was saddened by his experience but was still going through. And I was wondering, reading down the verses, 7 verses, whether this must be about Marcus Garvey.
What year was it?
1937 it was written, but it was published in 38 to 39 school magazine. By the time I reached the 6th verse, I realized what I suspected in the 5th verse. This poem was about Haile Selassie. Can you imagine a black girl in an exclusive high school in 1938 writing this poem about Haile Selassie's experience in London? But I wouldn't be surprised because she had grown up as the daughter of a Garveyite and she was very conscious and bright. And so, it's generations of us that have been prepared to take this stance.
Very profound note on which to end. I thank you for sharing that particular experience with me, and we will continue the dialogue. Rjr Small, it's been a pleasure talking to you today.
Thank you very much, Earl.